Thank you very much, Chairman. A very good evening to all here tonight, and those of you who are looking on YouTube and Facebook. I thank you all for being here. Fyzabad is very happy tonight to host TNT Speaks on behalf of the United National Congress, and I want to say a special hello to our political leader, who I know would be tuning in to this forum. Yet another forum as our Deputy Political Leader and Member of Parliament and the Chief Whip, my colleague David Lee mentioned. I also want to recognize in our presence my colleague, the MP for Couva North, Ravi Ratiram, also the party organizer, and of course our very hard-working PRO, Dr. Kirk Meghu, who is out sending releases at all hours of the night. Thank you, Chairman of the SIPA Regional Corporation, co-host Councillor Ramona Victor, and the other councillors from the SIPA Regional Corporation. Tonight I'm very happy, I'm very pleased, because I believe that TT Speaks, we've been able tonight in Fyzabad, and I'm sure this will happen as we go out through the other constituencies, to be able to get the view from the ground. And I want to commend and thank the four speakers who came here tonight for their views. So let us show them a round of applause. I think when you hear it from the ground, when you hear the ordinary person speaking about their challenges, I think that is very, very important. So we had Sarah Kalipasad, who spoke about, connectivity-driven commerce. And that is important. We're hearing about this government talking about IT and whatnot and so on. And I mentioned that particularly in respect to something that I'll speak about a little bit later, and that is this report, this COVID-19 report. And you speak about data, Sarah, and the fact of the matter is that one thing that fell down in this report is the fact that there was little data. And I'll come back to this in a short while. But so I want to thank Sarah Kalipasad. I want to thank Russell Ramnarayan, who explained the challenges that small businessmen, small business people face in this community. And of course, Suzette Mohammed, who is so very well qualified. When she entered university in 2017, she would have had the dream of working in Petrotrin, and that dream would have collapsed in 2018 in terms of her not being able to get a job. And of course, a very veteran, Dave Bim, who spoke about the challenges in the education sector. So my brothers and sisters, and again, we had the tremendous exposition of the challenges that the councillors of the SIPA Regional Corporation face, the many tremendous challenges on a daily basis, especially in terms of the funding. And I agree with my colleague, the MP for Pointe-à-Pierre, that in fact, we can't really expect too much changes. And Mario said it. It's just another name, the same thing by another name. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll, going forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I just want to speak a little bit about the collapsed health sector. We used to speak about the collapsed in health sector, but now it's perhaps, the collapsed health sector. And I want to speak about another pandemic. And I'm happy and I'm very grateful that the COVID-19 pandemic seems to be easing. Restrictions are being lifted, and the society is once more opening up. And I want to thank all of you who have taken the opportunity to come out tonight. It's been a long time since we've been able to meet like this. But of course, I know that you have taken your precautions of social distancing and wearing your mask, and I commend you for that. And it's in this line of things as you'll go forward in terms of taking your precautions. So COVID-19 pandemic is receding in the distance, but there's another epidemic, I don't want to call it a pandemic, that is there and has always been there with us. And this government, under the minister, has failed to treat with this. And this is an epidemic that, has been there since they took office in 2015. And I talk of the epidemic of non-communicable diseases, what we call chronic disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, asthma, and so on. And we saw that what happened, and this report here is an indictment. This COVID-19 report that was done by the committee is an indictment on the performance of the government during the COVID-19 pandemic. Granted, it was new, it was something that had never hit the world before, but it showed, and I want to commend those who wrote this report, because out of the 5 people on this committee, I know in some way, and they're all reputable people, professionals and so on, and they did an excellent job in terms of the short time that they had. Imagine they were given 1 week to do this report, eventually they were given 4 weeks. But yet in that short time, and despite all of the challenges they faced, they were able to produce a very good report. And this report is going to continue to be an indictment on the poor performance of the government, of the Prime Minister, who from Saturday to Saturday would come and speak, you know, from the pulpit of the press conference, and the Minister of Health, boasting that they were doing their best for citizens. But in truth and in fact, it turned out that that was not the case. But there'll be a whole lot more to say about this COVID-19 report. So again, I don't want to spend too much time. I mean, this has been said already, some of the shortcomings and so on. But essentially, this COVID-19 report is a story of overworked staff and understaffed wards. You had a situation where you had 1 registered nurse on the ward nursing 20 to 30 patients, 1 nurse to 6 patients in the ICU. And I just want to stop and pause for a moment again, you know, to express condolences to all of those families who have suffered and would have lost loved ones. Many in this community, in the constituency of Fyzabad, you know, would have lost their loved ones and so on. But you know, it goes to show that, you know, the government given us the impression that they were doing their best, and yet it turned out that they were not so. And there's a lot of detail in this report that speaks to that. And, you know, we'll be talking a bit more about that. So one of the interesting things about this report is that in this report, one of the recommendations is that we should treat with something called non-communicable diseases. So this is almost the government saying, listen, we now discover it have a problem about diabetes and high blood pressure and asthma. And I come back to the point that part of the reason why so many of our citizens suffered in the COVID-19 is because of these comorbidities. If you notice, every time you had deaths, they were talking about age was one factor, but of course the comorbidities. And this is because the steps have not been taken, were not taken to ensure that our citizens were treated properly to avoid and to deal with these issues. So since 2015, they've been in power. Nothing has been done to treat with chronic disease. The extended hours at the health center, which was started under the People's Partnership government, those hours were meant to encourage people to come to the health centers and so on to get their blood pressure checked, their sugar checked and so on. It was meant to be convenient for the citizens, and those were cut off as soon as the PNM took government. And of course, all of this took place while we had 500 unemployed doctors. From 2016, all of a sudden, you know, it's a very amazing thing, it's an interesting thing. When I left SWRH as the chairman in 2015, there was no question that when a young doctor qualified, after the state had spent so much money on training these young doctors, there really was no question that they would find a job, that they would be employed. And therefore, there was a system in place to engage these young doctors, either in the hospitals or out in the health centers, in the community centers. So all of a sudden, we find that you have 500 doctors unemployed, but yet the whole healthcare sector was falling down in the community. So we have to read between the lines there. And now, of course, we know the Minister of Health is very famous for shedding his tears. All of a sudden has now realized that he has to appoint a director of non-communicable disease. You know, it's not going to make any difference, right, appointing a director at this stage, because this PNM government simply is not in a position, unable to do this job. Because, you know, there are things that had to be done. And I'll just talk about one aspect of what is going to happen in this country as we go forward. Now, they spoke about something called a parallel healthcare system, and they boast about that all the time. They're boasting about parallel healthcare system, meaning that they had identified certain facilities to treat COVID-19. One of them, of course, the Couva Hospital, the backbone of the COVID-19 response, the one that they said and preached for 5 years that couldn't be opened, but yet within a matter of 2 weeks, they were able to open that hospital, thankfully built by the People's Partnership government and able to help our citizens in their time of greatest need. So, but there are other things that needed to happen. There's one of the commonest issues we have in this country, and many of you here will have had this experience where your relative experiences chest pain, they get a heart attack, and they have to go to the hospital. Now, the standard of care right now for that kind of thing is that you should be able to get what's called an angiogram. And many of you come to the MP office and because you are asked to get an angiogram done and so on. Do you know when we left office in 2015, we had things in place to start and to build something called a cardiac catheterization laboratory in the SWRHA. It means if that was done, everything was in place, and yet 6 years, 7 years, going into 7 years later, they are yet to come up with a reason why that structure has not been built. And now they are talking about, every time I ask the Minister of Health in the Parliament, they are talking about lack of funding and whatnot and so on. But what is more important than treating with the health of the population? So what it means right now is that these facilities, if this facility was in place, when you go to the San Fernando Hospital with chest pain, you wouldn't have to be referred to a private institution to get your angiogram done, or you wouldn't have to be sent to Port of Spain, or you wouldn't have to be put on a waiting list to get your procedures done. And whilst you're on the waiting list, many citizens have died. So that is one of the other issues, and of course there are many, many other projects that they abandoned when they took office. So this Minister of Health is all about PR, it's all about talking, but not doing. One issue I want to raise as well, and this is going to come to the forefront, and the political leader, of course, will speak a little bit more about this, but this is the question of, now we said the COVID-19 is coming to an end, but there's a question of what you call the decommissioning of the COVID-19 hospitals. So we know Point Fortin Hospital, for example, which was used for COVID-19, has now been decommissioned. That's the new hospital, and it's going back to be used as an ordinary hospital. The same thing is going to happen to the Arima Hospital. But, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I want to raise your awareness, and I want to keep this on the horizon. What will happen to the Couva Hospital when it is no longer needed to treat COVID-19 patients? And I throw this out tonight, and I call upon the government to give a clear answer as to what the Couva Hospital will be used for when it is no longer required for COVID-19. And I trust and hope that it will continue to be used as a hospital for the benefit of all of our citizens, and that no excuse will be made to close it down. The other hospital that we have to keep in mind is the Augustus Long Hospital, which is currently being used to treat COVID-19 patients. And I saw recently the union leaders and so on, and we spoke about Petrotrin, and of course in Fyzabad and in Pointe-à-Pierre, MP Lee, the same issue with the retirees and so on. But in particular, the Petrotrin retirees got a very raw deal in terms of their medical plan. They had an excellent medical plan. They were able to use these facilities, especially at the Augustus Long Hospital, to access top quality medical care. When Petrotrin was closed down, they were given some plan for 2 years, and now it's out in the wilderness. And the irony is that they have to join the rest of the public in the public hospitals, which are also struggling. So we have to keep an eye on what will happen to the Augustus Long Hospital. Dr. Lee is also the shadow for energy, and I know that the Augustus Long Hospital comes under heritage at the moment. And, you know, colleague, we need to keep a very, very close eye on what is going to happen. Is it that it's going to be given to a family or friend? And we'll speak more about that as the time draws near. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I will close shortly. I just want to raise one more issue, and we know that schools are going to open on the 19th of April. And of course, one of the issues that is of concern, and I have no problem with that, we are very happy our children have been home for too long, and we look forward to them going to school. But again, it shows how this government has fallen down. Now, while some parents may not be happy with their children between 5 and 11 getting a vaccination, and that is their right, and I respect that, we all respect that, but there are also parents whose children might be at risk. Some of these children may have asthma, they may have other chronic diseases or other ailments that if they get infected with COVID-19, they can be at risk. And since January of this year, the World Health Organization, WHO, who the government relies on, has approved the vaccination for 5 to 11-year-olds. And in the parliament, the government mentioned that there was a contract. They were engaged in negotiations with Pfizer to get these vaccinations. Yet, as recently as the last sitting in the parliament, we realized that that deal seems to have fallen through. We have this 2-week window now before school opens where these children could have at least gotten their first shot, their first vaccination, those who wanted. And we are told that those vaccines are not available in the country. We are told that the government is again waiting on a donation from Spain, a donation of 40,000 doses, and yet the Minister of Health, when questioned, could not give an answer. So brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, we will have a lot of challenges going forward in the health sector. We'll be speaking a lot more about that to you. But I want to give you the assurance that under the leadership of Kamla Prasad Bisesa, your party, the United National Congress, is very strong. We're ready, we're waiting, and we can give you the assurance that we'll form a strong government when we are given that opportunity. I close on the point of local government elections, and of course we know the PNM always has its eyes on the Sipara Regional Corporation, Meru, because they think that the Sipara Regional Corporation is in the area of the political leader, and therefore they always try to fight that corporation. But I want to say to them that whether the Sipara Regional Corporation remains a borough or whether it remains a corporation, come local government election, is the same licks for them. We agree? Same licks for them. So on that point, ladies and gentlemen, I want to close. I want to thank you very much for staying. I know it's been a long time since you've been out, and I thank you for coming out and remaining safe. And I wish that you all reach home safely. Have a good night. Thank you.